All right. So this is a question about consciousness. So you probably know which one it is. Um, I'm trying to phrase it. Uh, so nobody knows how consciousness works anyway. So let's start with the question more specifically. Could consciousness come from our evolution, say from neuroticism as a trait of keeping ourselves safe, or maybe empathy, uh, seeing things from other people's point of view?
Situ?
Ish.
Ish. So yeah. So I think depending on who you ask, you'll get a different answer. And I'll get to Meta's question in a second. I just saw it. So I am on the side that animals, like higher animals, like cats, dogs, dolphins, octopuses, chimps, like I'm trying to think like more towards the boundary. Cuttlefish, which are close to octopuses, let's say sailfish, sharks, lots of different animals have some form of conscious experience. Somebody like Richard, my advisor, I think was more on the side that they don't. But, and I think that because I don't know, it sort of depends on how you define conscious experience. So to me, the thing that sticks out, and this is just anecdata, is that every cat I've known has had a very distinct personality that's consistent over time. And so those differences in personality means that they interact with the environment differently, but also that they have sort of a persistent way that they go through the world and interact with the world and expect the world to interact back with them. And that kind of to me indicates that they sort of have a sense of who they are as little furry or scaly creatures, and they have some form of memory because they do remember bad things happening to them and try to avoid doing the things that lead to the bad things, assuming the feedback is done in a good way. So that stuff kind of suggests to me that they do have some form of conscious experience. It may not be quite what we experience, but they still have a conscious experience for the world to me. So to get more at the question, I think probably something like the mirror neurons in the brain which fire when we see other people or even like other us-ish organisms do stuff sort of as a reflection of what they're doing. So these are typically like motor neurons that'll fire when watching somebody try to fix something or whatever. And it's thought that this is a way to sort of save on learning. So instead of having to do it yourself to learn, you can just watch somebody else and get that mirror neuron engagement, get a rough approximation for what needs to be done, and then actually do it yourself. So I know part of the argument is that mirror neurons are what sort of underlie some of empathy, because if you can see somebody doing something and hurt themselves, you kind of feel bad too. And from that, you can kind of build up to like you see somebody hurting in some way, just like emotional pain, and that triggers like a mirrored response almost. And so you can do sort of tending and mending behaviors to try to improve their situation. And then that gets into the social networks of us being very little social creatures. So I could see empathy in being able to understand other people feel things like you do, sort of a theory of mind sort of thing, would help in consciousness. I'm not sure if it would come before consciousness or after. And I think, what was it, the neuroticism of staying alive in the question, sort of.
Yeah, neuroticism is a
I mean, so I think the bottom line is that organisms who have a conscious experience of the world have a survival advantage over those who don't. So I could see it being selected for long, long ago, where just if you have a memory of where you've been, what's happened to you, what little or environments or organisms to avoid, and which ones are safe, having a sense of you in the environment and your interactions with the environment, I could see that organism surviving better than one that just flying by the seat of their pants. Stimulus response. That burned, don't do that, but not really having a longer term representation of that. And so going back and getting burned again and again, or almost getting eaten, and then getting eaten. So I could see it being selected for. So I think consciousness and conscious experience is probably relatively old, not like crazy old in the grand scheme of things, but certainly not just humans or human like organisms that all died off.